Good morning, everybody. I'm here. My name is Lucinda Zoe. I'm the Senior University Dean for Academic Programs and Policy and have been hosting the CUE conference for the last decade. So I wanted to welcome everybody to this session and present a little context. This session today is part of our new and improved version of our CUE conference, what we've called this year a rolling virtual series for the CUE, which is Coordinated Undergraduate Education Conference. So we titled the series this year, Thriving, Not Just Surviving in a Time of Crisis, Expanding Our New Learning Environment. So this is the fourth session in the series. They've all been extremely well attended and embraced by the community. And so it's, makes me think this might be a good way to do some CUE conferencing in the future. Just a quick review. Our first session was on experiential learning opportunities called Hold On Tight to Your Dreams. That was in early April. And the second series was on promising practices, online pedagogies for the post-pandemic era. The third was on post-pandemic best digital tutoring practices, because things have changed forever for many of us and a lot of our best practices. And then today's session is on credit for prior learning at CUNY, validating knowledge to expand access and support academic success. As we all know, this is we passed a policy. The board passed a sweeping university-wide policy in June of 2020. And we are now beginning to implement that policy across the system over a 12 to 18 month period. It's going to be an incremental process to implement it. And so today, I'm delighted that we have a couple of representatives from colleges that have been very active in doing credit for prior learning already. They're here to give you some real life experiences on how this actually works. That's from Kingsborough and Lehman College. So I'm going to turn it over now to Professor Luby Alatriste, who's the co-chair of the CPL implementation, university-wide implementation committee. So it's going to be a great session today. I think for those of you that don't know a lot about it, this is going to be a perfect opportunity to understand the power of what this can bring to our students and to maybe do a little myth busting on what it actually means. All right, Luby, I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you so much, Lucinda. That's a great, energizing introduction. So good morning, everyone. My name is Luby Alatriste, and I'm professor of English and Applied Linguistics at City Tech, where I direct the multilingual writing program and ESO program. I'm also currently serving as the University Faculty Senate Senator and am directing, co-chairing Academic Affairs Committee, and have been elected on the Executive Committee a board where I serve, also on the Board of Trustees, on the Committee for Academic Programs, Policy and Research as an alternate. It is my pleasure to extend our greetings to you today on behalf of the entire Credit for Prior Learning Implementation Committee members, on behalf of my co-chair, Joanne Russell, who is Provost of KBCC, and our distinguished panel experts, Dr. Nan Travers and Professor Richard Finger from Lehman. So what is so important about this session, about CPL, and why today? What is happening, and that this is such an important central piece? Simply put, it's the students. CPL is truly about the students who are returning to college after a long or not so long break, after they have had life experience or work experience, after they have started perhaps their business or work and maybe their own families, or perhaps they have served the country abroad in the military and are returning to us as veterans or as ex-Marines. So it is really this population of mature students that CPL is primarily going to serve. CPL is a sort of a promise of a new life for them. And that's why we're so excited, because we were bringing so much more to people's lives, bringing them back to college and giving them credit for their prior learning, experiential or otherwise. In order to sort of illustrate this, I would like to show you and introduce to you one such student. So Alyssa, if you could help me with this, we're going to show you just a very short video of one of our students that we're very proud of.
Sorry, bear with me for 1 second.
Hey there, my name is Yasmin Mohammed, and I graduated from SPS as a business major in February 2021, and I'm currently a retail operations manager at Samsung. So my post-secondary education experience began in 2011, spent a year at NYU, followed by the Air Force Academy for Civil Engineering, realizing I wasn't studying something I was passionate about. So I pursued a career before deciding to return to school at LaGuardia, then finally SPS after landing at a company that pays for tuition. Um, Credit for prior learning was by far the most challenging aspect of all of my years at undergrad outside of financial aid, and has absolutely had the most impact on preparing me for now pursuing my MBA and my PMP, most, if not all of which will be self-paced. Currently, I'm interviewing for senior manager roles, which I would have been ineligible for without a degree. CPL allowed me to complete my degree at that accelerated rate in February rather than May now, and remain competitive for job opportunities as things are reopening. I'm currently pursuing my MBA. I'll be taking the project management certificate at SPS in the fall, and I'm studying for my PMP, which I plan to take after completing the certificate. And while I embrace that everything happens for a reason, if I knew about credit for prior learning at LaGuardia, rather than through my conversations with Professor Sparrow at SPS a couple years ago, while I was balancing 60-hour work weeks with the in-person classes, I may have had the opportunity to exit the pandemic with an MBA as well as a certified project management professional. I will acknowledge that CPL is not for everyone. General courses can be a challenge for many. They certainly were when I was 18 and my prior learning was AP classes and an after-school job making $7 an hour. But I do truly commend Professor Sparrow for elevating the learning experience and acknowledging that college can't be a one-size-fits-all approach to make an impact. I truly hope to see the program grow, not just at SPS, but truly throughout the CUNY schools. And as a shameless plug, if there's a desire for an alumni with an MBA to support as an adjunct, let's talk a little more in 2022. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. And as you can see, clearly this is a mature student, someone who understands learning, understands life, can manage and balance a lot of things, including a very hectic work schedule, right? So as she said, it's really not for everyone. And I think that's an important thing to remember, that the students who might be potential students are mature students who already have had life experience and work experience, and who can really understand how to approach college, but with this extra push with credits for prior learning for what they've done or achieved, they can get that sort of accelerated pace and move and stay in college and achieve what their dreams are. I want to tell you just a little bit about our implementation committee, because our work has been extensive and very, very sort of compactful. And we work together, a large committee, primarily in two subcommittees. One is the subcommittee on standards, working on standard exams, but most importantly on industry credentials and portfolio assessment. And the second subcommittee was systems committee, that was really responsible for coding and planning of the technical side of sort of our registrars and how that's going to work across CUNY, applying the exams and registering the exams. The work was, I think, very equitable, because we had a large number of people giving their input, checking work, and having representation from registrars and various offices to also academic disciplines. Today, you will hear a lot about CPL, but I think most importantly, you will hear examples of this work, and also we will address some of your questions on the later on when we join the panel. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. Even during the next phase, when I introduce our next keynote speaker, Then we'll have 2 presentations. So keep dropping your questions, asking questions. We will address them later. At this point, it is really my pleasure to introduce our keynote today, Dr. Nan Travers. And I want to just give you a little bit of a background so that you know and understand how important she is to this presentation today. Nan Travers is a PhD Director, Center for Leadership and in Credentialing Learning for SUNY Empire State College. And she focuses on research, policies, and practices of the recognition, validation, and credentialing of learning. Dr. Travers led the Credentials As You Go initiative, which developed the incremental credentialing framework. She also is the PI for the All Learning Counts project, which is focused on evaluating competency-based workplace learning for college credit and providing micro-credentials that include the training and lead to degrees. She previously led the department of the Global Learning Qualifications Framework to assess college level learning, serves on the board for the Prior Learning International Research Consortium, is a lead contributor to the Learning Recognition Collaborative in conjunction with the National Institute for Learning Outcomes Assessment, and has served on the core team for the National Connecticut Credentials Initiative. Travers serves as a founding co-editor for the journal PLA Inside Out, and she has a PhD in adult learning from the University of Connecticut and an MA in curriculum development from Johnson State College in New Jersey. So with much ado, I'm happy to welcome, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Nan Travers.
So thank you so much. And I'm going to share my screen. This morning, what I plan to do is to just hit some highlights in terms of thinking about CPL and why it matters. And then the panel will go into more details around implementation and how it actually works. So one of my first questions is just simply, how can institutions be learner ready? We tend to think about are students being ready for us, and are they college ready? But we really need to flip the question and ask, are we ready for them? So we're going to start. We have a couple of polls that we're going to do, and each time I do a poll, I need to stop sharing and I'll bring up the poll. So we're going to begin with the first poll, and it is now launched. And in each case, there's just a degree, somewhat agree, and agree. So it's just a 3-point scale there. And there's just I think there's 4 questions on this first poll. We'll give you a few minutes to answer. So we are bringing some in. We're about halfway to the group. We have about 3/4, so let's just give a few more seconds here for people to finish up. Okay, I think we may have reached everybody, so I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to share the results. And so the first one asks that you understand what credit for prior learning is about. And basically, we have a few people who are not familiar. Some people, about half, a little under half of the people who are, when you say somewhat agree, means you sort of know, but you sort of don't know. And then the remaining portion agreeing on that. So we're hoping that today, some of that will be cleared up for people as you go along. CPL is an important opportunity for all students. We have the majority that are agreeing. That's about 75%, with just under a third with somewhat agree. So there's that somewhat agree is where you sort of are in the middle on that, and just one person who disagrees. And so the operative here is the word all. And so that's something also to be thinking about as we are going through this morning. CPL helps students persist and complete their degrees. And again, we've got the majority at 89% agreeing to this, a few people somewhat, and one person that disagrees. And we're going to look at some data that supports that question. And my institution has a definition of college level learning. When we talk about being able to evaluate people's learning for college credit, we need to be thinking about what is that definition. And here we see the majority are sort of in the middle here. We've got quite a few more people who disagree and some who agree. So this is something you need to be thinking about within your own institution. So I'm going to stop sharing that and go back to sharing my screen. Just move right along here. And so I'm just going to begin and give you just a little bit of background. So when we talk about credit for prior learning, what we really are referring to is verifiable learning that students will have acquired outside of the traditional learning environment. We tend to think about the classroom as the traditional learning environment, and that it is assessed for program level credit. The reason I use program level here is that it can be used at both the undergraduate and the graduate level. It also can be used for even in non-credit environments. So it really means that it is appropriately assessed at the level that the credits are going to be used, but that all learning is verifiable. The sources of learning come from many different places, and so we need to always be thinking about all the types of experiences that students have and how those that learning could be examined for being college level. There are many different types of assessments. A lot of you are familiar with CLEP exams, AP exams, those kinds of standardized examinations. The military has the Joint Service Transcript that covers all but the Air Force, in which they have the Air Force Academy and have their own transcript. The workplace learning evaluations are there are many that have been evaluated by the American Council on Education, ACE, and the National College Credit Recommendation Service, NCCRS. In addition to many institutions that have evaluated workplace training, licenses, certifications, and a lot of these could be upfront evaluations that can be considered. And then there's the portfolio process. So they're, depending on the student and their experience and the type of learning that they have, there may be different kinds of options that are available for the students. In terms of the students, we do tend to think of the students as being the adult student. And that is very true. Adult students tend to have more professional learning. They've had more opportunities to do self-study and having different kinds of experiences and voluntary, or they've served in the military. But we also find that younger students also are involved. The research actually shows that a lot of younger students are working, and so we don't think of them tending to have enough experience to be evaluated, but there are cases where they are. Many students have been homeschooled and have had the opportunity to dive in deeper into the learning, and that could be examined. Dual enrollment programs. I know CUNY has extensive dual enrollment programs, again, the advanced placement, and many younger students have done their own self-study. We also need to be thinking about the students who are currently enrolled. We use the word prior learning in the title of all of this with the idea that somehow all this learning happened before the student walks in. But many of our students will continue to work, continue to get training on the outside. They may have other additional self-studies that they're involved in that also will contribute to their learning. When we look at the learn work patterns of our students that are out there and looking across the population in the country, what we see is that we tend to focus in on that last focus degree pathway, as though students are going to go to school, and then they go to more school, and then they go to more school, and then they go to, and then finally they go to work and gain. PD stands for professional development. But we see that for a majority of students, what we are seeing is that work is being incorporated much more into their lives than what we tend to think about. And so again, we need to be thinking about the kinds of learning that students have acquired. And one little piece of data here is that 13%, only about 13% of students who drop out of college actually return within 5 years. So we end up with a lot of students that are out there that have some college and no degree. All my numbers are pre-COVID numbers. Latest numbers have not been updated out there for things like this. So these are all pre-COVID, and the expectation is that these numbers are actually going to increase. So when we think about all the adult learners, and these are being defined at 25 years and older, this data originally comes from the US Census Bureau that I have analyzed. And we see that 53% of the adult population do not have any kind of post-secondary credential. And about 1/3 of those, that means 1 out of 3 of those, of that particular group of learners have some college and no degree. And that's estimated at 36 million. So that means that 1 out of every 3 people who do not have a post-secondary credential has attempted college and has not been able to complete for whatever the reasons are. And a lot of them are very valid reasons. And so we're not doing something there. We have a huge number of people who are starting off, but we are not able to have good ways of coming back and being recognized for the learning that they have acquired. When we look at those that have obtained the college credential, we also see huge differentials in terms of students of color versus white students. And it becomes even more obvious when we look within group comparisons. And this particular data that's shown on this slide are indicating that, again, a huge differential for Black and Latinx students compared to white students. And when we look at the pattern of white students and Latinx students, we see almost the opposite. So with the white students, we have 33% with high school or less, and the Latinx, it's 60%. And when you look at the number of degree, again, it's almost a good reversal of that. So we have to really be thinking about our groups of students and the kinds of learning that they will be acquiring. Anything that's not within captured within a degree is considered, it's learning that's undocumented. And so we need to really be thinking about all the ways that we can provide good venues for those students to be able to continue their education. One thing else I'd like to point out on this is that for Black adult students, that they have the highest percentage of some college and no degree. And if you compare that to the data on the student debt load, that also Black adult students carry the highest debt load. So we are seeing more students who are starting and unable to complete. And we have to be really thinking about how we can be looking at that. When we talk about the kind of the thought about where education fits into the cycle that the students or the learners have, we see that, we tend to think about higher education ending at some point in order for them to go to work and live their lives. And we really have to be thinking much more in terms of the extent of the learning that's happening in all of these different places and the kinds of cycles that the students will be going through, and how learning recognition can happen through all of that. The advantages of this for our learners, our CPL learners, is that it does recognize students for what they know. This is actually a very important statement, because when we look at all of the research around persistence and completion, what we find is, the bottom line, when you synthesize it all down, the bottom line is that when students feel connected to the institution in some way, they're more likely to persist and complete. So when we say to students, we know you have knowledge, we recognize that knowledge, we value that knowledge, and we are actually going to count that knowledge. That says an enormous amount to an individual who is trying to move ahead in their lives. Then, you know, often we talk about that they're able to earn college credit, and that allows them to complete degrees sooner at a lower cost. There are other benefits also to credit for prior learning. One is in recruitment. You're able to really target certain populations. It may be, for example, that you want to target military students, or maybe you have a partnership with an industry partner and you want to target those employees. There are other ways of also thinking about being able to recruit individuals who do have prior knowledge that can be recognized. There is research on retention. I'm going to address that research in a few minutes, but it does show that students who participate in some form of CPL are more likely to persist and complete. And as I said, I'm going to show you that data in just a few minutes. There is an expense management piece here. We can talk about completing degrees at lower costs. There are some institutions out there that actually create scholarships for taking, let's say there's some money for CLEP exams or covering the costs of portfolio. And so there is some potential to offer certain groups of students some scholarships. Also, if employees get reimbursed for coursework at their job, that because the cost of CPL is significantly lower than the cost of taking a course, that it does help that employee reimbursement go farther. It also really emphasizes partnership development. A lot of, I do a lot of work with different kinds of partners, whether they're industry partners, state agencies, and other groups. And they're always really excited about the fact that we could recognize some of their training and that can go towards somebody's degree. And so we find that this really helps develop partnerships. It also really helps connect the academic programs to industry. And what we find is when we talk to faculty, they repeatedly say it's the best professional development that they've ever had, because they end up understanding better how the instruction of the classroom is fitting into the bigger picture of the working world. And many times through the portfolio process, faculty will say that they learn from the student and they're able to bring that into their own classroom. We're going to move to the second poll question. So I'm going to, again, I have to stop sharing. I will launch the second one. So let me just give 1 second here. And I have launched that poll. In this case, there are 3 questions. We're about halfway there. We're getting there. We just need a few more. Okay, I think we have got that. And so let me share the results. CPL is an excellent way to recruit students. We have nobody disagreeing, with the majority agreeing. And so again, as I said, it can really be used to target particular groups of students as well as overall. Everyone across the university system should be aware of CPL. And here we have pretty much everybody who agrees. And this, what we find is that students learn about CPL through all kinds of different ways. And so it's really good that that everybody who is part of an institution or through the system should be aware of this and be able to talk about it to students. CUNY has a policy in place for CPL. And I debated whether to put a question in here, whether you actually actually had read the policy, which I think the numbers would probably look a little bit differently as well. And so we see 42% that agree with this. There is a policy that is system-wide and has been released and is in the process of being implemented, which Lucinda mentioned at the beginning is going through a phased group, and Luby was talking a little bit more about the work of the groups that are looking at that. And so I really encourage that if you've not looked at the policy, that you get hold of the policy. It's actually, you can Google it and find it really quickly and get a good sense of that policy. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that and then go back to sharing my screen. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the research next. There has been multiple studies that have been conducted on the learning outcomes, the student outcomes that for students who have engaged in some form of PLA. There was a study done by CALE, which is the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning, back in 2010, and then they have just done a 10-year update of that study. So this has just come out back in November of 2020. This is the latest research results. They're very similar to the results from 10 years ago. This chart is showing, it's comparing non-PLA students and PLA students in terms of persistence and completion rates. The students on the bar on the left is the non-PLA students. The barely noticeable tan is certificates. The blue is associate degree, and the cranberry is the bachelor degree. So again, this is just looking at undergraduate. What we see is the non-PLA students persisted and completed at or the completion rate was at a 27%. When we look at all of PLA students, we see here that it jumps to 49%. So comparing the 27% to the 49%, we do see that students who engage in some form of PLA have a much higher completion rate. The bar that is far to the right is the PLA students, but filtered for those that are who are using military credit. The reason for filtering out military students is not to discriminate against military students, but rather that completion data is a little harder to gather because students are deployed or they're moved from one base to the next. Their completion at one institution is harder to track. And so what we see is that when you are looking at all other forms of PLA, excluding the military credit, the completion rate jumps to 73%, which is quite amazing. When I talk with lots of faculty over the decades in terms of looking at credit for prior learning, one of the concerns I hear a lot is, oh, won't this take students out of my class? Aren't we, we're not going to have their tuition coming in. Well, what the data both 10 years ago and currently show is that students who engage in PLA tend to take, in this case, the latest study is showing 17.6 additional credits compared to non-PLA students. So what this means is that they are sticking around, they're taking more courses, and they're completing at higher rates. The other thing to point out in this latest study is that they also did a significant amount of analyses by different equity groups. And when you look at again, the same thing is that the bars that are on the left are the non-PLA students. The bars in the middle are all PLA students, and the bar on the right are the non-military PLA students. And again, you can see even by different equity groups that there is a huge impact on being able to participate in PLA. The one thing that they did find in this study is that when they did an in-group comparison in terms of students having the same opportunity within an institution, that Black students had a lower, what they called an uptake rate. In other words, there were less, proportionally less Black students taking advantage of this. And one of the questions really becomes, how are we addressing the advising to students, and are there implicit biases that are built in where we think that some students might have experiences that are college credit worthy while other students might not. And so there needs to be a great deal more research in looking at why those numbers are different. Other research that's out there is also looking at students who engage in specifically the portfolio assessment, and consistently across many research studies. I did a meta-analysis across these studies. And what we see is that students who engage in the portfolio process have an increase in reflection, problem solving, being able to understand their tacit knowledge, be able to talk about it, the increase in self-regulation, self-awareness, self-direction, increase in study skills. And one interesting piece came up in a couple studies that looked at the role of faculty, understanding the role of faculty. And really, when you think about the portfolio process, when a student is engaging in being able to reflect on their learning, being able to articulate that, to be able to put it into the concept of learning outcomes, that we're really asking students a type of learning and type of self-assessment here that we tend to not ask other students. And so really understanding how to think about assessment and thinking about learning is why they had an increased understanding of the role of faculty. We're going to go to one more poll set. So hold on one second while I switch us over. And I'm launching the poll. In this case, there are 3 questions, and we'll give you a few seconds to finish those up. We're about 3/4 of the way there. Okay, I think we might have everybody who's been engaging. And so the first is that CPL opportunities should be at both the undergraduate and the graduate level. We do see the majority of people, about 2/3 are agreeing to that. Basically a third somewhat agree, and again, one person disagree. And what we're seeing is an increased trend across the country in expanding this to graduate level. A lot of our students will finish their undergraduate degree, they go out and work, and now they're coming back as professionals. And there are definite ways and some different strategies that we are seeing across the country around that. If you are in a graduate program and are interested in knowing more about these strategies, these are things that we can do some follow-up around. The CPL opportunity should be available to all students regardless of age or background. We have 92% that are agreeing to this. Again, when we start to restrict who can, which types of CPL is offered, or starting to restrict who can engage, then we have to start to ask ourselves around equity pieces. There is a study that is currently being analyzed right now that I'm privy to, in which one of the results that are showing that from this study is that those institutions that only accept CLEP that are in this study, and none of you are in that study, it's a different state, but those institutions who only accept the standardized exams are also institutions that are primarily for white students. And so we start to see that choices in terms of the types of ways that we evaluate learning can actually then prevent some students from being able to engage. And so there's some real question there in terms of looking at that. The CPL practices should be consistent across all CUNY campuses. And here we've got about 2/3 saying that they agree and about 1/3 saying they somewhat agree with the one disagree. And so again, we need to be thinking about, when we talk about consistency, we want to be thinking about, that people are following similar standards, that there's certainly similar ways that are happening across campuses, but that there might be some unique aspects in terms of how things operate at a single campus. But remember, your students, and the student that we heard speak this morning attends more than one CUNY. And so we want to really be thinking about how students can start their education at one of the campuses and then be able to move to another campus and have that, that prior learning be approved as they move along. Okay, I'm going to finish up with my last few slides here. So give me just a second and we'll move right along. So one thing that you want to be thinking about is where CPL fits within the student life cycle. And again, there are different kinds of entry points to be thinking about this. We tend to think about it happening in kind of one place in terms of, oh, you've got this learning, let's get that in, let's fit it into your degree. But we need to be thinking in terms of how we help students understand what CPL is all about. And that's sort of in that upfront in terms of the marketing, the recruitment, academic advising, those pieces, helping them through the actual process and fitting it within the degree. And as they finish up, we find that students are continuing to learn that can fit in, and sometimes they may not have had the appropriate learning at the beginning, but by the time they're finishing up, they also could be recognized for their learning. The overall process when we look at this is that there's a process of being able to recognize learning. As educators, we need to be able to recognize different sources of learning and how that learning can be articulated and documented, and the students need to understand that as well. Then there's a phase of the validation of that learning, and there are these different types of assessments and assessment criteria, and we have to be thinking about, what are the most appropriate ways to evaluate the type of learning that that student has. And then there's the credentialing of that learning. It might be for academic credit. It might be towards a program requirement that might not be credit, but still would fit into that. And some institutions also recognize it in their non-credit side. In many ways, the whole evaluation of the student learning and trying to look at this is very similar to looking at a course learning assessment. So when we develop a course, we tend to think about developing the learning outcomes. We then align those learning activities and we align the assessment. With the credit for prior learning, we're just going in a different order, but the same pieces are there. The students are having those learning experiences first. From that, we determine what their learning outcomes and competencies are, and then we assess it for the credit. And so we're not really doing anything different. We're just, the order is really what is, just a little bit different in that. Students need to really be supported through this process. None of us have been brought up through the educational system thinking about our prior learning and understanding how to be able to document that learning and articulate it to somebody else, whether it's through an exam or through a portfolio or any other way. And so they need a significant amount of advising. They need to understand what the process is about. We can't leave them on their own to do this without any kind of support. Students will get frustrated and really give up. And so So we have to be thinking about the kinds of institutional supports that we put into place. Will there be a course that goes through this or workshops that are offered? Is there an advisor who's going to work with the students? The learning centers, how are they going to be prepared to really support students in this process as well? So there's a lot to be thinking about in terms of how we support students. And then lastly, I just want to point out that there are many stakeholders who are involved in this. The students are clearly the stakeholders. We tend to think about the faculty, but there's a lot of staffing and also looking at the different kinds of offices that support the institution. And so when you think about how are you going to keep track of the student data around this, you need to be thinking about how the IR department and how IT will be involved. The portfolio process, are you going to have that as part of a online portfolio system, or are you going to just stick to paper? So that as you're working through all of the details, you need to be thinking about all the people who will be touching this in all the different ways, and how those stakeholders also need professional development and support through the whole process. So that concludes my kind of just overview, which was very quick. And I'm going to stop sharing, and I will turn this back over to Luby.
Thank you so much, Nan, for this wonderful presentation of the sort of the what and the how and the why of the CPL. I think it would be a good idea to have maybe up to a couple of minutes, given that we have a few questions that are very relevant. So I'm going to read out those questions, and if you could just provide a quick answer before we move on to our next set of presenters. One question is actually about the distinction between 2- and 4-year colleges. So the question is, do we have any data on the number of students using CPL for 4- or 2-year colleges?
So the answer is yes, we do. And both the 2010 and 2020 study done by Kale, and the second one where Witchy was involved as well, they were able to divide out and compare the 2-year versus the 4-year. In terms of persistence and completion, the numbers are higher at the 4-year level. And so we see that CPL students are a little bit higher on the persistence and completion. In terms of the numbers of students that participated in the study, the 2010 had less, proportionally less 2-year, but they made sure that this 2020 study was much higher. I can also, in just a minute, I will put in a URL where you can go and look at the study yourself. And so that's important. One thing I do want to point out about the research is that there is a lot of research out there, both nationally and internationally. But the reason I keep bringing up these two studies is they are the largest studies, and the number of students who participate in the studies are actually quite huge.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, the same participant, Olin Diaz, is asking a follow-up question on this. What % of university do have CPL policy? I assume this is meant as the university across the country.
Across the country, we are seeing that the policy is increasing tremendously. And so there are probably about a third of the states that at a state level have policy. We're seeing that many systems are now putting in policy, and also at institutional level. I don't have numbers right off the top of my head, but I do want to point out that over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen a huge uptake around CPL across the country in all kinds of institutions. And so we're seeing policy right off in terms of how that really is growing as well.
Yes, thank you very much. I think we'll hold with the set of questions for our Q&A. We thank you, Nan, for answering these questions. And we'll move to our next set of presenters. This segment is on CUNY College examples. And we have representatives from Kingsborough Community College, Joanne Russell, and from Lehman College, Professor Richard Finger, who will be giving short presentations on this. And they actually presented at the Academic Momentum Conference too. So I would like to first invite and welcome Professor Richard Finger. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Luby. Let me try to share my screen here without screwing this up. Okay, can everybody see this? All right, so thank you very much, everybody. I'm really excited to be here to share a little bit of the work that we've been doing at Lehman College. It was refreshing to hear Luby start off by saying it's all about the students. And I think the work that we've done at Lehman College over the last couple of years has been all about the students. And I really appreciated Nan's last slide with the stakeholders. When I think about the efforts that we've put into CPL at Lehman over the last few years, it really is a partnership throughout the campus. It begins, of course, with our faculty and engaging our faculty in this work, because in our shared governance environment, it's important to have faculty buy-in along the way. But of course, this work also really is so involved in so many administrative units. I did a quick scan of who's on this call, on this presentation right now, and noticed that just at Lehman, we have some folks from admissions, our registrar's office, our advising offices, as well as our faculty on this call. So it really is a campus-wide approach, and there's plenty of growing pains along the way. We are excited about the credit for prior learning policy that CUNY has passed, and we've been working diligently to implement it. But our work with CPL really began about 3 years ago. We engaged in some work with CALE on Latino adult student success based on CPL. We've also were fortunate enough to receive some funding from the Graduate NYC College Completion Innovation Fund, which allowed us to focus on leveraging CPL opportunities to accelerate degree completion for students. We've taken this funding and we've done a lot on campus. It's helped us lead a lot of discussions with our faculty about the different viewpoints. It's helped us to break down some of the commonly held beliefs or negative stereotypes that are sometimes associated with CPL, and at the same time, we're able to provide some training to our faculty as well as our staff on this. And from an administrative perspective, it's also allowed us to really rethink how we process these opportunities. When I think about CPL and I think about it at Lehman, we hardly ever refer to it as credit for prior learning. And I've said this in a couple of places where I've been talking about this. We've kind of Lehmanized our definition of credit for prior learning. We talk about it in our approach as improving academic momentum, where we're helping students maintain that 30 credits to graduate, reducing time to complete when we identify opportunities, when we identify students who potentially can graduate and have satisfied all of their major and minor requirements as well as gen ed requirements. We've engaged in some work in helping students maintain their Excelsior Scholarship eligibility. So we've been doing some data mining to see where students may be missing a credit and can earn a couple of credits to maintain their eligibility. We've been utilizing the opportunity to earn CPL credits in the readmission process with students, keeping students engaged while they may be taking a semester off. And we've also included in here, while not very traditional in terms of definition, our transitions to grad school and the creation of some BA, MA programs at the college. From a traditional perspective, we've been working to articulate AP examinations, CLEP, DSST exams, and others at this point as we roll out the CPL policy. But we've also focused on portfolio programs and growing and strengthening our portfolio programs. We have focused increasingly on credit by departmental exam, where students can show their competency by either passing final exams or presenting portfolio of work if it's in a creative course that shows competency in the subject matter. We have been fine-tuning the way we're awarding credits for international baccalaureate students. And we've really taken a look at military credits. And this is an area where we really do need to focus more on, where we feel we could be doing a better job. But more specifically, we've identified and partnered with faculty for some very interesting opportunities for students. A couple of years ago, we noticed that we had a population of students who were 1 or 2 credits away from graduating. And these students oftentimes did not have the funds or the remaining financial aid to get any type of support to offset the cost of tuition. So we developed a 1 and 2 credit option by awarding credits for completion of Red Cross CPR and first aid. And that's been a tremendous opportunity for us. Additionally, in light of the pandemic, we have focused on looking at some of the FEMA trainings and awarding credits accordingly for those FEMA trainings. And what we're noticing is a lot of our employees who are, really heroes, right, at the end of the pandemic, have been required to take some of these FEMA trainings over the course of the last year to respond to their day-to-day job activities. So we've had some success with this. Additionally, we've been developing our own. We've developed our own COVID certification, where we looked at those trainings early on in the pandemic, where individuals who were applying for COVID tracer positions were going to need to take 3 or 4 different trainings. And we started awarding credits based on that. Our business and economics department has done a great job at linking what were previously non-credit bearing experiential learning opportunities, turning them into credit bearing experiential learning opportunities. We've changed our policies to align with New York State guidance so that way our undergraduate students can earn up to 12 credits of graduate coursework during their undergraduate degree that satisfy both undergraduate and graduate degree requirements. And we're also looking at different certifications that we're giving credit for. Finally, Lehman has a number of BA programs where we sometimes find that our students who are transferring to Lehman will fall short in the 90 credits of liberal arts needed to graduate. We're identifying ways for students to earn liberal arts credits via CPL opportunities in order to not have them exceed taking 100 and 120 credits at Lehman in order to graduate. So we've done a lot of nice, unique things. From there, we've learned a couple of lessons along the way. The biggest lesson that we've learned is the timely processing of credits upon entry and making sure that the maximum number of credits that we can award students are being awarded at the time of admission. And I can tell you, this is something that we continue to struggle with. This is something that we're trying to tackle right now, even for the fall semester, but we're working on that. We've leveraged DegreeWorks data to identify students who have the most to gain. So we do a lot of work with the DegreeWorks data to identify who's missing what and how we can engage those students in ways to earn credits. We've been creative, and we also view this in some ways as an equity issue, where students want to take a winter class, for example, but they simply can't afford the winter class. I think this goes to some of the points that Nan was making, where we offer them the opportunity to engage in some of these CPL opportunities during the winter session. We're going to do something towards the end of the summer session as well. We're leveraging opportunities to engage stop-out students. Like we said, we want to keep the students earning credits while they take that semester off. We've been offering scholarships or stipends, I should say, for students to earn CPL opportunities to encourage degree completion, where the college formerly used to set aside a sum of money to pay for that last credit or that last 2 credits that a student had. Now we can serve 50 students, 100 students with the same amount of money by offsetting the cost of CPL opportunities. We've learned that students appreciate earning career credentials and being acknowledged for those credits that they've earned. So we've been celebrating that with students wherever possible. We've been capitalizing on what's free. And I think that's really important. If we can find quality programming that's free, we capitalize on that. I know recently when we were looking to identify some liberal arts opportunities for students, we've been turning to some high quality Coursera programs. We're starting to leverage the ACE guidelines on credit and on college credit and military credit. And that's also to help us align with the new CUNY policy. And we're trying to clearly identify credit equivalents for our police, fire, EMT, and other academy trainings that individuals go through. This is where we've struggled over the last couple of years, and it's something that we feel we need to really turn our focus to as we enter into the fall semester. So the results of this for us have really been staggering. And, in the fall semester alone, we awarded 57 CLEP credentials, 68 FEMA certifications, 90 students participated in the COVID training, 141 students participated in CPR and first aid. We awarded 14 life experience portfolios, 343 AP test credits were posted, and we had 35 undergraduates enrolled in graduate courses. If we were to just go back 2 years, the CLEP number would have been 2 or 3. The FEMA certifications would have been 0. The COVID certifications would have been 0. The CPR certifications would have been 0. I think you see where I'm going with this. So we've been really excited with the work that we've been doing, and I'm happy, of course, to engage in the panel and discuss this further.
Thank you so much, Richard. This is really very informative. It's always great to get examples and particularly the data. So I think that can kind of frame this conversation for our participants. And if we can, there is a couple of questions, if you're willing just to answer. I see that Babette Audin, I hope I pronounced this correctly, of course, congratulated you and said, do you evaluate credits upon transfer from community college to Lehman? And do you accept CPL credits earned at community college pre-transfer? I mean, some of these questions will be answered later, but maybe this is a moment just for a quick answer.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's something that we're certainly, the CPL piece of it, of course, we're working on in terms of implementing the CUNY CPL policy. That's certainly part of the policy. And it's something we're actively working on, making sure that we figure out the best way and most efficient way to do that. But we do intend, of course, to honor the policy fully and make sure that we're accepting those credits as articulated per the policy.
Right. And what rate of students at Lehman benefit from CPL? I guess.
You know, that's a, we could say that it's comfortably 1,000 unique students. So I'd say 1 in 15. Mm-hmm. If we're going to look, you know, if we look at matriculated students, 1 in 10, 1 in 12, it's a pretty high number for us, considering we're a very traditional structure and that we're only 3 years into this type of work.
Right. Yes. Thank you very much. Well, Lehman, I remember when I was there in the English department back in the 90s, even then there was some credit for life experience. So Lehman's been on the forefront, and I'm really happy to see that this has gone so much further. Thank you so much for your presentation. I hope it has given some, framework to our listeners and our audience. And I would like to move to Provost Joan Russell, who is also the co-chair with me of the CPL Implementation Committee. So welcome, Joan, and I welcome your example from your college.
Thank you very much, Luby. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm here also with Amanda Kalin, who is our Director of Curriculum Planning and Program Development. And she is our CPL liaison. And so she has been very involved in how we move forward in this work. So we're pretty, the work is pretty nascent at Kingsborough Community College still, but we are delving into credit for prior learning in 3 ways. We have a very strong continuing education and workforce development unit. So we have historically already had some non-credit to credit articulations, and we're looking more intensely at that, and Amanda will be sharing some of her work there. We're also collaborating with CUNY SPS as part of a grant to identify credit for prior learning opportunities prior to transfer. And Richard just mentioned the importance of identifying early on opportunities that students can earn credit through credit for prior learning. And so this has been a great partnership for us with SPS. We've learned a lot. And we also have a grant funded by the Carol and Milton Petrie Foundation called Bridges to Health Careers, in which we're trying to create health careers pathways for students from non-credit to credit or incumbent workers to credit. So with regard to some of the, what we have in place for our stackable credentials, I'm just moving all of you so I can see my slide. From non-credit to credit, we have quite a number of them in place, and we're going back in light of the policy just to make sure we clarify and codify what we are doing. So we have a user experience set of courses that I'll spend more time explaining that students can take in a non-credit capacity and earn up to 9 credits in a new concentration that we've developed. we've had a long-standing ESL food handlers program in which the students that complete that can earn up to 9 credits in our culinary arts program. Like other colleges in CUNY, we award 6 credits for the EMT credential, and this can be applied to our paramedic program. Richard mentioned CASAC. We have 3 courses that we offer in our non-credit area, and those 3 courses or 9 credits can be applied to either the CASAC certificate on the credit side or our chemical dependency counseling program. And we have a health coach program in partnership with Maimonides Hospitals. This is delivered to CCMAs, and this was actually by the request of Maimonides. They wanted to upskill some of their highly skilled CCMAs. These students can earn 6 credits in our community health program. So the user experience design work that we've done, this approach is hopefully something that we'll do more in the future. It was very intentional, where we developed the courses in partnership with the non-credit side of the house. So, and this work came out of a CUNY TechWorks Department of Labor grant. Our continuing ed and workforce development unit worked closely with the art department to develop and design 3 new courses: human-centered design, UX visual design, and coding for designers. And actually, as I'm saying this, I want to give a shout out to Babette Badant, who is, I believe, on here. She was the one that actually submitted the proposal and then and ended up going to Hostos. But Babette started this work at our institution. So Babette, you'll be very happy to know how far it's come. The funding period for this grant was 2017 to 2020. And the training, the courses were originally developed as non-credit courses, and they were offered through CEWD at no cost to qualified applicants. And the purpose of this particular grant was to provide opportunities for employment in the high-tech industry. Between 2018 and 2020, CEWD worked very closely with our art department in the development of the credit courses that then went through college governance. And so in combination with an existing course in our art department, Art 73, which is digital publication, the art department developed a new concentration with these 4 courses called the User Experience Design concentration that is part of the AS degree in graphic design and illustration. So we are actually, this is the first fall 2021, where this concentration has been fully approved and will start to enroll students on the credit side. But students who have taken user experience design as a non-credit program, and we still have students taking it on the non-credit side, can transfer in up to 9 credits. 2 of these courses, Art 25 and Art 26, have been adapted for use in the EverUp micro-credential work with New York City CEO Council. So this is being offered to 125 students this summer. Amanda's going to talk about our introduction to ESL, the ESL Food Handlers Program, which has been in existence for some time. But as Amanda will describe, there was no formalized written agreement, and we had to go back and really document what we were doing. So Amanda, do you want to take it away?
Thanks, Joanne. As we can see when we're looking at it, when developed, there was no formal written agreement for the ESL Food Handlers Program. And as this program provides a really significant opportunity for our students where they can earn up to 9 credits towards the culinary arts degree, we really wanted to formalize this pathway through articulation, but that was going to involve a couple of steps. So to begin this process, it was really necessary to review the current degree requirements and the alignment of the non-credit courses to the credit course learning outcomes. And again, that was important because this wonderful program was developed couple years beforehand, and our credit program, our AAS and Culinary Arts, did undergo some degree revisions. And what we had was that we had 3 courses on the non-credit side through our Center for Workforce Development and Continuing Education. And they were a culinary arts skills component course, a food safety and sanitation certification course, and an ESL component course. And then just go back one slide.
Sorry.
Okay, no worries. So, and what we wanted to end up doing was really to start to think about, how do we end up beginning this process? So what we wanted to do, the first step, was to think about the course competency framework, or the alignment. And we formally defined that as the course learning outcomes for the credit courses. Our next step was that we created a template to align the credit course learning outcomes to the non-credit courses. And I'll be able to show that to you guys in the next slide. And we individually reviewed the syllabi for the non-credit courses to determine if and where we felt the credit course learning outcomes were met. And again, we thought that that was an important experience to do, to kind of end up just getting an initial overview of where we may have felt some of this material was covered. And as the course, there were 3 components in the continuing education non-credit side, we also wanted to take a look to see if were there some components spread out, and because they didn't necessarily need to be only held within one specified course. So we wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive and evaluating that. After all parties were able to review, we discussed our individual alignments. And then our next steps were to discuss potential opportunities where modifications to the non-credit curriculum could be made in order to align with the credit course learning outcomes. And again, we wanted to end up being able to give our students the best opportunities to ensure if there was an alignment with some tweaking, we wanted to end up making sure that we explored that. And if we jump on to the next slide, this is just a sampling of the template that was created. And what you'll end up seeing on the left-hand side is that we included the college credit course. And again, there were about 3 of the 3 courses that were there because the students can earn up to 9 credits. Right next to it, we had the college credit learning outcomes. So that was where we were looking to see, does the non-credit components end up aligning? And then we have the continuing education workforce development non-credit components. As you can see, those are our 3 courses of the culinary arts skills component, the food safety and sanitation certification, and the ESL component. And in each of the columns, you're able to see, I think you should be able to see some of our write-ups about where we felt, did we feel it was covered? Where did we feel it was covered? And we had 3 folks that were evaluating it. So that's where you end up seeing the 3 different text colors, just to end up thinking about where did some of these things come from. And in addition to this, we had Mark D'Alessandro, who was our program director for our culinary arts program that was involved in this, myself, and Grant and Natalie, who were on the continuing education side, who thoroughly knew that work. So it was really a group effort in looking at the syllabi and starting this alignment process. And our next steps were really a focus on communication, formalization, and publication. And what we wanted to do was really prioritizing our relationships and communications. And we felt that this was important to really focus on between departments, between academic chairs, between instructors and program directors. We really wanted to have this working collaborative relationship as we are always thinking about looking forward to the future, that we know that there's going to be additional opportunities and that we want to start opening those lines of communication and keep them opened as we kind of go through this process. And when we were formalizing the articulation agreements, we wanted to end up ensuring that we included language of annual evaluation, so that we wanted to make sure that we were reviewing the student retention in the programs, both the credit and the non-credit side, progress towards completion, and academic performance and GPA. And we thought that this was necessary to ensure student success in both programs, again, the non-credit and the credit courses. We also wanted to make sure that we reviewed for potential degree changes as well as changes to the non-credit program to ensure that there was still a continued alignment and that we were still supporting student success. And lastly, it was also important to focus on publication of the non-credit articulation agreements. And this is to end up including a notation in the yearly college catalog under the related degree programs so that it is accessible to students. And again, another avenue for publicizing it. We will also want to ensure that we designate a place on our articulation website for non-credit to credit agreements to again highlight these opportunities and spotlight them for our students. And lastly, we want to ensure that we were informing our academic advisors of these opportunities so that they would be able to incorporate questions about non-credit program participation into the script for advisement and registration. So again, also making sure that if a student may not be forthright because they didn't realize of this opportunity or they had forgotten about this opportunity, we want to put something in place that would be a trigger just to simply ask them so that we can end up awarding them credit for their participation.
Thank you, Amanda. This development of this process was an important step for us to ensure academic integrity of our credit, the credit awards that we were making for work done in the non-credit side. And I appreciate Amanda's work on this. One of the other, I mentioned this Bridges to Health Careers grant funded by Carol and Milton Petrie Foundation. And the purpose of this grant was to develop pathways from the non-credit to the credit side. And we have a number of pieces in place. It's a busy chart, I know, but if you focus on this course in the middle, the Emerging Trends in Healthcare Careers Seminar, it's a 1 credit course, but students can take it as a non-credit course and transfer in the 1 credit when they matriculate. This was developed to be a bridge between our non-credit healthcare programs or incumbent workers and potential credit programs that they could articulate into. So we, in that course, we talk about emerging trends in health careers and also provide advisement and career coaching. We've been working with 1199. 1199 has a Lumina grant funded to develop American Council on Education credit recommendations, ACE credit recommendations for some of these non-credit healthcare certificates. One of the comments that my colleague in 1199 made that reminds me of something that Nan said is that, for someone who's been a central sterile technician for 20 years, to be told that that doesn't count for anything when they move on to a higher credential is defeating. And so I think Nan talked about recognizing students for what they know. And there is a pathway we're looking at between central sterile technician and surgical technology. And so we're trying to piece together pathways that make it more transparent to students on how to move up in their career, but also making the credit equivalencies very clear throughout. And finally, we've been fortunate to be working with CUNY SPS on a Graduate New York City grant. And this was proposed before COVID, and one of the goals was to develop clear articulation agreements from our completely online associate's degree programs. USPS is completely online bachelor's degrees in order to provide that pathway for students. And we've done that, but one of the, there's two other goals in the grant. We intended to embed opportunities for students to earn micro-credentials and also identify credit for prior learning opportunities at strategic places along the transfer pathway. And so we have a subcommittee that's been working on this, and I want to show you in the final slide just, I think what it could be a nice prototype for us to use in other ways, but also perhaps across the university. And I have to give credit to SPS totally for this. I think Holly's on the Zoom meeting today. What they've done is taken our articulation agreement, which is the first two columns here, and then in another column, identified all the potential credit for prior learning opportunities so that when a student is still in their associate degree program, they can look ahead to see what credits might they be able to CLEP out of or might earn in another way that would fulfill some of the requirements of the bachelor degree program. So this was amazing. SPS identified multiple opportunities, and this is just a snapshot of one piece of one articulation agreement. But we're using this now to help our transfer coach provide really clear guidance for students to identify these credit for prior learning opportunities. So thank you so much. It's been really a pleasure working with so many colleagues on this important work.
Thank you so much, both Joanne and Amanda. That was very informative and lots of information there. I think details for people to understand how they can approach this on their own campuses. This sort of concludes our keynote and our two examples from CUNY. And I would like to now usher our panel. So our distinguished representatives, right, Nan and Richard and Joanne and Amanda, together, we have sort of imagined this as a couple of preset questions that we thought would be a good way to start on the panel. And while these questions are being answered by the panelists, you can also drop your questions or observations or comments in the chat. The three questions are actually structured. One is about bringing the student to the center. So we have some sub questions, and I'm hoping that Alyssa might be able to drop a slide in with those sub questions. The second topic is about faculty as driving mechanisms for CPL, because we want to talk about the role of the faculty, their central role really, and to address a variety of concerns that might be there and to kind of ease the nerves and look at what opportunities are. And the third set of topics is the institutional impact, right? So we should really start with the student at the center. So some of the questions that I would like to pose to our panelists, and they can sort of answer either based on what is the best fit for them, or they can volunteer answers, is sort of what are the key benefits that you have observed for students who utilize CPL? So we'll look at some benefits. And I think this will be a question for people who've actually done it on campus. How does the CPL experience contribute to the way the students view their place on campus and within the campus community? What do CPL students bring to the classroom? So we'll look at the classroom perspective. And how can a college more fully recognize and support the experiences of students who come to college with a college level knowledge? So that might be, so 3 for the campus-based people and 1, maybe the last one for Nan. So please take it from here. Whoever from the panelists wishes to answer any of these questions.
So although we're still new to this, to credit for prior learning, and we don't have a large student population in the same way that Lehman does, I think the recognition, what we're communicating to the student in the process is that they have already done college level work, they've been successful, and they can continue on with recognition for that work. But I think for especially some of our incumbent workers, the knowledge that they've already done college work is empowering for them to be able to move forward.
Right. So that would be the benefit, right? I mean, the benefit of sort of empowering them, energizing them, encouraging them to continue and to move forward. What about the campus community? Because I know that frequently comes up in meetings and, committees that I have attended where faculty are concerned and they say, well, how does this enhance their community sort of understanding what it means to be a college student, what it means to be on campus? So anyone on the panel who wishes to answer this to sort of help us understand how that piece works?
I think I'm going to jump in. So this is Nan, and there's kind of a couple different approaches to addressing this question. One, I've talked to a lot of faculty over the years, probably thousands of faculty over the years in terms of there's a couple different areas where I hear concerns, but one area is, isn't the student going to lose out on the kinds of experiences that they would have in the classroom? And I think this is what this question really is addressing. And there is this sense that somehow, and I'm doing this very generically, not saying any one of us, but in general, we tend to think in post-secondary education that somehow our classroom is going to be the unique place that is going to make all the difference to the student. The actual process that the student goes through in terms of examining their learning and having to really think about what they know, what they don't know, how that fits into the academic process, in itself is a very valuable educational process that we tend to not provide to our traditional students that are going through only coursework. And so we could talk about, well, there's a dialogue and community that we build within our classroom that enables the students to really engage. We are not saying that that students who are doing the CPL will have zero interaction within any classroom. What we're saying is that they may not have as many classes that they need to take, but they also are getting an added benefit of being able to do reflection and looking at this, regardless of how they have, they're being assessed. So even if it's an exam, or maybe it's military credit, or maybe it's one of the formats of training or licenses that have been evaluated up front, the student still has to be thinking about, is that learning appropriate? Is it going to fit into my degree? How does it fit together? And so we're really saying is that the student still gets classroom experiences, but they also get this added benefit that the non-PLA students aren't getting. And so in many ways, I would like to pose the question about how can we do a better job for every single student to be able to look at what they know, how that could apply to a degree, and how does that help them move towards the goals that they're trying to reach. And really thinking about what are those in-person, whether it's online or face-to-face, but in the moment kinds of interactions, how do we maximize those in such a way so that when students are engaged in a class, that we are very clear about the outcomes that we're expecting there as well. So in many ways, I think that the whole CPL process gives institutions the opportunity to really examine about what their educational experience is about and why that is important, and how they can be very purposeful about those pieces in its different formats.
Yes, thank you, Nan. I wonder about the next question. I'm wondering whether maybe Amanda can explain a bit more, because I found that program with the food industry and the ESL students and that bridge really amazing. I haven't been aware of it, and I'm an ESL person on my campus. So Amanda, could you maybe take the question, what do the students bring to the classroom? Because this is an amazing opportunity to show how students can bring a specific experience, right?
So I think it's a wonderful opportunity for our students where English may not be their second language, where English is their second language, and to really kind of bring them into a classroom community on a college campus. And what is a unique experience in the ESL food handlers is that it's really contextualized, that they are learning their English skills alongside the culinary arts component, as well as the ESL standalone component, and within the certification, the sanitation and certification component. So the ESL instructor is present in each of those courses as well. So they are able to make those connections and contextualize them. We also have the wonderful opportunity that the individual who teaches the culinary arts skills component also teaches on the credit side in the AAS in culinary arts. So again, he is also aware of the rigors and the necessity of what's going to be expected. And it's able to, again, he's contextualizing it, working it very closely with students that may not have these opportunities elsewhere, so that this way a student can get the certification, start to end up moving on and getting into the workforce, and then can wrap back around to enroll in the actual culinary arts program. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity to reach out to students that may not have seen themselves on a college campus, or may have originally just thought that this was a job opportunity for them, but we've now turned it into a much, much larger educational experience with a very different trajectory for them to move them up within the industry that they're exploring.
Yes, thank you so much, Amanda. I think that bridging of life experience, real sort of on the job experience with the opportunity to learn and grow academically, you said it beautifully. Maybe Alyssa, we can move on to the second slide and move on to topic 2 with faculty as a driving mechanism. And let's look at the questions. Anyone on the panel can answer, and I would like to invite the audience to chime in at this point. If there are faculty members out there, to post their questions in the chat. So the faculty as a driving force, really sort of the questions that we thought about when we were discussing this is, what role do faculty play in the process of awarding credit for prior learning, right? And how is their expertise and involvement crucial for CPL? Because the faculty do play a very large role in this. So how can college expand on those networks?
I can chime in a little bit on this. I think in particular with the work that we've done is that we've engaged the faculty right from the start. We didn't even seek out funding for anything prior to asking the faculty for their thoughts on what we're going to be doing and engaging them in the writing process of what we were going to seek out. And I think that's that's key, to have them involved right from the start. The other process, the other thing that I think about is having to meet the faculty where they are at the moment. And I think in some cases, some faculty are more willing to fully engage with different CPL opportunities where others may not be, but to meet them where they are, I think is important, and then to be able to show the results and the impact.
Right.
I'd add in one last thought on it would be, we've leveraged a lot of problem-based solutions to problems based in CPL, and a lot of those problems have been generated by the faculty first, and we've been able to leverage some CPL opportunities to respond to those problems.
Right. Thank you. So let's say I'm a faculty, I'm a person who is not fully aware of this, and I'm on campus at Lehman. How would you engage faculty? Could you just give us a little bit of that nitty gritty, just so people can really understand, like, how does one get engaged? How does one get, who would reach out to me? Where would I go with that?
And this is my response, and I think this is unique based on every campus. I've been at Lehman, 13 years now. So I know most of the faculty, and the faculty and I have a pretty good relationship. So I'm pretty comfortable picking up the phone or sending an email to nearly any faculty member on campus. I'm close with the deans as well. So to pick up the phone and start to have this conversation and see where people are. Certainly, I don't ever present things as this is how it's going to be done. It just doesn't work that way. I think it's a negotiation, it's a discussion, it's a proposing a solution. It's certainly, that's the approach that I take, and others may take a different approach or not agree, but that I've always been more along the lines of building the relationship and engaging people casually when it comes to these things.
Yeah, right. I agree with Richard. I think it's the faculty have to be organized. There should be a committee and the brainstorming ideas and move on from there. What ideas, what thoughts faculty have and how to implement it. I'm from Edgar Rivers College. Years ago, I'm there for I think 13 years or so. And once we talked about it and people had positive things to share, but we did not move on. So if we have to implement credits for experiences, life experiences, it has to be organized, it has to be established, and there should be a channel. Otherwise, it can be misused also. And I think faculty have very strong voice because we are the ones who work with students. And where I work, we get a lot of students who are coming to college after a big gap in their lives. They are moms, they are grandmothers, and I think their life experiences should be honored and they should get some credits for that. So, in order to have this thing to operationalize, faculty have to be very strongly involved with that.
I have to chime in here a little bit. I do agree that faculty plays a big role also because obviously we have to get the buy-in to make sure that the learning objectives are met. I think you may find that there are more faculty who are open to it than we think if we can educate them better. And I think a lot has to do with faculty not knowing much about CPL. And I mean, to be quite honest, when I started getting involved, I had when Pam asked me to brought these portfolios to me, I had no idea what they were because that's not what I was familiar with. So, but over the years, as I read the portfolios and became more familiar with the importance of it, and as I became more involved now with the CPL, I'm recognizing I'm more and more convinced that this is important. I think it's a slow cultural change, and I think we have to start educating the faculty. And we also need them because they need to be a partner in this. We cannot just isolate them and try and make policies and stuff without them. So I think the best way to start is there are a lot of faculty in the professional areas who are very open to these kind of CPL, and maybe getting them involved and then pulling other faculty is probably the way to go.
Right. So what I'm hearing is really a synergy, right, Dean?
Right.
It's a synergy of faculty and people who are on the forefront, the leads, right? We now have campus leads and others, because a lot of it is about raising awareness. I mean,
Right.
as it is with most things, whatever it is, we need to sort of inform people and see what their understanding is of what is the best for the student, what will benefit our New Yorkers. These are our students, they're New Yorkers, they're fellow New Yorkers, how to uplift them, how to help their lives, right? But it has to be a synergy because it's not a one-way street.
No, no. And also faculty talk to each other, right? So if they start seeing that some faculty are doing this, like I talk to my colleagues when I get a chance, and they're starting to buy into the idea of, oh yeah, experiential learning is great. These are faculty who never thought about it in, history or English, for them, they just more concerned about teaching the content. So, but when they see what we're doing in business and economics, they're starting like, oh yeah, you're right, this is important. So let me look into it. So you kind of need faculty to start talking to each other also and getting that little bit of a cultural change.
Mm-hmm. And I think the first step should be at CUNY colleges, they have Center for Learning and Teaching or Center for Teaching and Learning. We have to start from there. Let faculty know about it. First, we have to educate the faculty.
Right.
There is an art of doing this. I mean, you just cannot give credit for experiences and how you help individuals to make their portfolio. Portfolios are very, very powerful element for this. I mean, they are presenting their portfolio. What should be in that portfolio? So all those things, and students who are coming with those experiences, how we are going to, I shouldn't use the word evaluate, but how should we examine that? I see another hand up, so I'm tapping.
So Rupam, I think you're raising some very important questions that actually precipitated the development of the policy. So from my perspective as the provost and chief academic officer, I have to be able to tell all of our accrediting agencies why we're awarding credits. And so what I value about the policy is that there's an element of academic rigor to it. And so the two committees that are working on this, the standards committee is attending to exactly some of your concerns. What is the process? What is in a portfolio? What kind of standards should exist in order to award credit? So what you will be seeing shortly from the committee is actually we call it a manual, but it's actually going to be posted on the website, recommendations on how to do this work and how to do it well while maintaining academic integrity. That's been at the core of this because we're also trying to prevent just haphazard award of credit because that will negatively impact all of CUNY as well.
Yes. The reason I'm interested in this because I'm the perfect example of credit for experiences. I came from India when I was 18 and I stayed home for my husband. He did his PhD, he's a professor, raised three children, 3 girls. And when my first daughter went to college, she went to Columbia and we couldn't afford 2 tuitions for Columbia. So I went to Queens College. And although I didn't get any credit for my experiences, but my experience were like a resource for me.
Yes.
I had raised 3 children and I thought teacher education will be a good place for me. And I worked hard and I was in Dean's List and I'm here, I'm a faculty, taught in the school system for many, many years. So I know, the rigor should be there and getting the credits for something which I don't deserve or which is not worthwhile would have impacted me negatively. I hope I am making the point. It's about the rigor, academic standards,
Yes.
so that it becomes a resource for you and it puts you on the road to success, not something which is not rigorous or you don't learn much.
Yes, exactly. We agree.
Yes, rigor is
Thank you.
absolutely at the center of this, and that's precisely why the implementation committee, worked so hard, and we had attended to every detail to ensure that credit is given only when credit is really due, and that the academic standards would be followed and respected in the highest of possible ways. But it's wonderful to hear your story, Rupam, because I think that it's also for many women. This year has been a year of equity for women, and women tend to be stay and raise their children, which really is a degree on its own. And while society should recognize it one day, but that's another question. But I would like to kind of use this segue to move on to our last topic, because people would ask, so what's in it for the institution? How is the institution playing? Thank you, Alyssa. So let's take a look at these questions briefly, and then we'll have at least 10 minutes for our audience to just pose their own questions. I mean, how can colleges benefit from CPL, right? What are some key challenges for colleges? What are they likely to face when launching CPL? How does CPL stand to impact the culture and quality of the environment, which we sort of touched on before? So I would like to open it again to the panelists, and please pick your question, which you feel most comfortable with.
So I'll say that at Kingsborough, in our healthcare non-credit to credit programs, we see credit for prior learning as an opportunity to enhance enrollment, which is significant for all of CUNY. For the student, once again, we're communicating that some of what they've done already in their work life or on a non-credit side has value towards college credit, but it also enhances the transition and the number of students who can transition from non-credit to credit.
I'd say the challenge that we're facing right now is that as we grow opportunities, is the ability to standardize our approach to this and ensure that we can present this to students in a very uniform way and manage student engagement with these activities. If you think about just what we're doing with the committee work on the test credits, we're articulating hundreds of exams, and in many cases they haven't been articulated before, and how we're going to manage the flow, ensuring students aren't getting credits for the testing of multiple competencies. These are going to be real learning opportunities for us over the next year or so.
Right, so these are some short-term, and we'll look at maybe, sort of 5 years from now, but is there anything to think about in terms of long-term impact, in terms of institutional and educational impact down the road? Are we seeing, new visions, new ways of doing things for some populations, or?
I think in developing some of the stronger partnerships with our continuing education and workforce development office, that really is going to allow a completely different pipeline of students to really kind of get them into onto the college side of things, again, for an upscale of their skills, to put them in a place that they may never have envisioned themselves. I think it also allows an opportunity that once they have felt comfortable with the non-credit side of the house at Kingsborough, it makes it a much easier transition potentially as a comfort level to come over to the credit side of the house and enter into a degree program. And again, I think there's a lot of opportunities for continued collaboration to develop these pathways. And again, particularly for our AAS programs that are really direct pipelines to the workforce, I think it provides a lot of different opportunities immediately and then in the long run.
And I'd like to just kind of add to what Amanda is saying there, and just refer to our experience at SUNY Empire State College. We have just reached our 50th year, and we have been engaging CPL for the whole 50 years. And so we do sit on some longitudinal data. What we find within our own student body reflects what we're seeing out in the national data, is that students who engage in and you have to excuse me, I keep calling it PLA because that's what we call it, prior learning assessment, but the CPL, do persist and complete. Half of our undergraduate students, we offer it both at the graduate and undergraduate level, but half of our undergraduate students engage in some form of PLA. And so in that, we're talking, we have around 17,000 undergraduate students at our institution. The students are able to complete their degrees faster at less cost, which is significant. We do find that one of the areas that is probably our fastest growing area, it has to do with our partnerships. We have done a lot of evaluations that are licenses, certifications, workplace training. We've also expanded that to look at how to evaluate competency-based workplace learning. And so we are finding that that is really important in terms of working with different industries across the state of New York and being able to really provide educational access to all students.
Yes, thank you, Nan. I think there is definitely that aspect of growing opportunity and expanding connections and links with other industries and other stakeholders, right? Which is really, it's about bringing stakeholders to the table. And I also want to focus on a couple of things from the chat. From Lucinda Zoe, I mean, really the CPL Standards Committee was almost all faculty. So faculty were really the front and center of working throughout this process. And, they were the ones who were looking at developing standards and criteria. So it was very faculty centered throughout this initiative. And also, Jose, I don't know if you want to chime in with your comment because you made a couple of other comments. I'd like to, at this point, actually open, the floor to all of the audience participants, whoever wishes to make a comment or has another question. We have about 6-7 minutes. I want to thank you, the panelists. Thank you, Nan and Joanne and Amanda and Richard for your insightful responses to the panel questions. And, please, everyone, anyone who has additional questions or comments, we're happy to hear them. And thank you, Alyssa, for sharing the PowerPoint. I see lots of comments in the chat. Of course, I see Jennifer writing that we have created partnerships with nonprofit training providers to award credit towards our information systems degree for their training. So again, the emphasis on partnership and those links between the college and the world beyond, right, the industry. I also see that Jose has written about the collaborations between our community health AS degree programs, right? So I think I hear a lot about connections community, the link between, learning in college, in the classroom and outside. And we know that a lot of that sort of situated learning, we call it place-based learning, situated learning, and the opportunities outside of the classroom or to bring that learning into the classroom. I know others have asked about this recording today. I believe we can, I know we're recording it. I'm not sure how the specifics will work. So if Alyssa or anyone knows about it, or we can just inform the participants later. Any other questions or comments?
Luby, yeah, can I offer just a closing sort of summary of the
Sure, please.
Of the policy implementation process for folks? We spent about 2 years developing this policy and went through a very rigorous vetting process through, university-wide stakeholders. And from fall of 2018 until the summer of 2020, when we passed the policy. So what I would say to those of you that are becoming familiar with this policy now is that the policy is just sort of the underlying infrastructure and the foundation so that each campus can develop their own program. We have the implementation university-wide implementation committee with the two separate committees that have been charged with developing the criteria and standards and giving the tools and resources to the colleges to each develop your own program. So we recognize that, and we do see it as like a 2-year implementation process. We know that our biggest challenge is educating faculty. That's always been the case. But we had a lot of faculty involvement with developing the policy, and of course now with doing the standards. But you can expect to see over the next year or so, we will be stepping up our efforts to offer more faculty development, professional development on this, working with the Centers for Teaching and Learning, building out our website, creating, point of use, instructional guides and videos for faculty. So we know that's a challenge. And we also recognize that it takes a while to reach 7,000 faculty across the CUNY system. But that's really where we are in the process. And it is incremental and it's an iterative process. And, the more folks know about it, the more they can spread the word, the better for all of us. So particularly the students. Luby, you're on mute.
Yes, thank you, Lucinda, for clarifying that further, because faculty have been involved and the committees have made really a tremendous effort to reach out and inform the faculty and the colleges. So there is certainly a lot of work ahead of us too.
Oh, and by the way, we do have a CPL website that is up now with a lot of this information on it. So, and it could be, Alyssa, that we might be able to post this video on the website, I believe. But the website is live. It's got a lot of resources. It's got the policy. It's got a lot of information already. And as we develop more, we're putting more and more information on the website.
Yes, I think that's actually a great place to post this video, right, Lucinda? So if people also want to see it. Any other final questions or comments?
No, just that we'll be making the video and also the slide decks available on the website for this group and for everybody else who may be interested and couldn't attend today.
Okay, thank you. I suppose I should really officially thank all of our presenters and the panelists. I do want to also thank Lucinda specifically for this enormous initiative and for her dedication and work on this project. It's been years in making, and there's just so many pieces, and even with the committee work, there are so many moving pieces, and of course, my co-chair, Joanne, and all other co-chairs and members have worked so hard. It's not just this past year, but their work has stretched even beyond that. So thank you all. Thank you, Nan Travers, for your keynote. It was, I'm sure, very informative for others who might have not really known about the process as much. And thank you, Richard. Thank you, Amanda, for joining the panel and for your presentations. Alyssa, for your invaluable help with all of the slides. And I wish everyone a great day, and please, reach out to us. We're here to help, and there'll be a lot more memos and help from us and more work. So on behalf of everyone, thank you, and hopefully we'll hear from you soon, and you'll hear from us. Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend.